So I'm just going to greet everyone and encourage as many participants as are comfortable doing so to maybe turn on your video screens, to keep yourselves muted for the time being, but please feel free if you're so moved to show your faces. We hope to have a structured but somewhat casual and comfortable session tonight, so don't be shy. Give it just a few more minutes. Joel, are you still admitting people?
I have deactivated the waiting room, so everyone's trickling in.
That's wonderful. So the first thing that I don't want to forget to say is that we are recording the session tonight because this is the second of 3 recruitment events that we're having this spring for admitted students. There will be other events also that we're going to be reminding you of in just a few moments. But these videos will be posted on our website, the Arts Oasis New Students event page, where links will be included. There's one already for the past session that we've already held. This one will be uploaded shortly, and then the next in the trio will also be making its way to that site. So just to let everyone know, we are going to be recording. Okay, and I think we should probably go ahead and get started because we have a few things planned and then want to make sure that we leave all of you participants time for questions and answers at the end. So I would like to, first of all, introduce myself. My name is Heidi Wendt. I'm a professor in 2 units in the Faculty of Arts here at McGill. One is the Department of History and Classical Studies, where I served as the undergraduate program director for several years, and the other is the School of Religious Studies. Starting this September, hopefully when many of you arrive on campus, I'll also be taking on a new role as the Associate Dean for Student Affairs, and so perhaps we'll be working together in that capacity as well. And I just want to congratulate all of you for having been accepted to McGill. I've been at McGill about going on 8 years now. I'm American. I've been living in Montreal since 2017. And I have to say, I just never cease to be very happy with the choice that I made to move to Montreal. McGill is a wonderful institution. I've had such great experiences with the students here. They always continue to impress me. I really adore my colleagues at McGill and staff at the university. It's a wonderful place to be. And so I just wanted to extend my heartiest congratulations to all of you for having been accepted and really, really hope that you'll be matriculating with us in the fall. We have several things planned this evening. As you'll see, we have an agenda that consists first in a land acknowledgement, which I'll get to in just a moment. Then I'd like to introduce the various colleagues and one student who will be joining us this evening. And also, sorry, did the agenda just go away? I think so. And then we're going to have a couple of mini lectures in research presentations given by 2 of our professors here. One of our students is going to be speaking about student perspectives on research at McGill and some of the opportunities that you might be able to seek out as students studying with us. And then after that, we have a couple of reminders about future events of the sort that I mentioned before we turn to an open question and answer session. At any point, I would just encourage all of you to please feel free to drop questions into the chat, and then you can also raise questions in viva voce during the actual question and answer period later on. So as is our custom here at McGill, and I'm just going to move my screen for a moment, we'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement that McGill University is located on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe nations. McGill honors, recognizes, and respects these nations as the traditional stewards of the lands and waters on which we meet. Okay. So tonight we'll be hearing from a variety of speakers, including 3 professors, as well as 1 student researcher, as I mentioned a moment ago. First, we're going to hear from Professor Jennifer Bartz, in the Department of Psychology, followed by Professor Santiago Camara, in the Department of Economics. Next, Sophia Flame, who is a student who recently completed an arts research internship, and she's going to be reflecting on that experience. and talking about undergraduate research opportunities here at McGill. And then we'll be hearing from the supervisor for her REA research, the Associate Dean of Arts EDI, Jessica Coon, who's also a professor in the Department of Linguistics. We're also joined tonight by Nelly Viduras and Joelle Niche, two Arts Oasis advisors, as well as Dr. Laura Brassington, the Director of the Office of Arts Education, and Ramesh Vadavel, our Director of Arts Oasis. So these are all people who are going to be able to speak to different perspectives of undergraduate experience as well as research here at McGill. And so, without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to my colleague, Professor Jennifer Bartz, in the Department of Psychology, who's going to be talking a bit more about her research and the ways in which undergraduate students can be involved in that.
So good evening, everyone. And again, congratulations on being accepted to McGill. I too love Montreal and love McGill. So I'm really happy to be here to tell you about a little bit about the research in my lab, so you can get a sense of the kinds of research that's going on in psychology at McGill that you could be involved in. And I think this presentation also might give you a little sense of my teaching style if you were to take one of my classes. So next slide. It probably comes as no surprise to you, especially after the pandemic, that being socially connected, that is having others with whom we spend time that is enjoyable and whom we can count on for support when we need it, is important. Next slide. What may be more surprising to you, as it was to me when I first learned this fact, is that social connection is also vital for human survival. So this figure may look a little complicated, but basically it summarizes the results from over 150 studies looking at the association between having social relationships and health outcomes. Put simply, those who are socially integrated have a significantly higher likelihood of being healthy and not dying. Next slide. Here's the amazing part. This effect of social connection is comparable to other well-known factors associated with physical health, like quitting smoking, and exceeds that of regular exercise and maintaining a healthy body mass index. Next slide. So why might this be the case? One explanation is that humans have evolved to be social creatures, and two observations speak to this idea. Next slide. First, unlike many other animals, humans lack brute physical strength and prowess. Compared to other animals, we're pretty helpless when it comes to self-defense. Relying on others, sharing resources, distributing risks, that's our survival mechanism. Next slide. Second, humans, again, unlike many other animal species, are born in a very immature state because of the size of our brain. As such, humans require constant contact and care and protection from our caregivers during infancy. Human infants will simply not survive without caregivers. Next slide. So based on these two data points, scholars have suggested that humans may have evolved to be social creatures. Social connection is adaptive for humans. And if this is true, we would expect biological evidence to support this, that there are biological mechanisms in humans that promote social connection. And one of the main areas of research, this is one of the main areas of research in my lab. We look at the biological and psychological factors that facilitate the formation and maintenance of social bonds. And a major focus in my lab is the neurohormone oxytocin, which is implicated in mother-infant and adult-adult pair bonds in non-human animals, as you can see from these slides, the pictures in these slides. Next slide. The other biological candidate implicated in attachment and bonding that we focus on is the endogenous opioid system, which mediates our experience of pleasure and pain more broadly. So at a more concrete level, the way we study this is we pharmacologically manipulate these systems to see how enhancing or disrupting them influences attachment and social behavior. And we also look at how genes related to these systems influences these same processes. So I'll just end with an example of the latter approach. Next slide. So in one study, we recruited 92 romantic couples to participate in a 21-day diary study in which they reported on their behavior and affect after each interaction with each other, specifically focusing on kind of cold, quarrelsome behavior, like making a sarcastic comment, or warm affiliative behavior. And then each participant or each partner in the interaction also reported on how they felt during the interaction, specifically focusing on experiences of felt security, which are really central to attachment. We also took saliva samples from these individuals so that we could genotype them. And we were specifically focusing on the mu opioid receptor gene, which is involved, again, in this thinking about endogenous opioids and attachment. So what this slide shows you is on the x-axis, we have the partner's quarrelsome behavior. And on the y-axis, we have what we call the actor's experience of felt security. And so what you can see is, not surprisingly, everybody felt less secure when their partner behaved more quarrelsomely than usual. But what we see is an environment by drug interaction, such that those individuals with the more sensitive variant of the OPRM1 gene showed significantly more steep declines in felt security when their partner behaved more quarrelsomely than usual. Next slide. I don't know how I'm doing on time. Just to say, we also replicated this same finding in children. So this was part of a very large, the Maternal Adversity, Vulnerability, and Neurodevelopment Project, which is a longitudinal study of over 191 mother-child dyads. They were recruited when the mothers were pregnant, and we followed them up into adolescence. So essentially at 18 months, researchers, like potentially you, went to the family's house. They videotaped the mother interacting with the child, and they coded those videotapes for maternal sensitivity. When the child was 36 months old, they came to the lab. And again, in a paradigm potentially administered or coded by a research assistant such as you, engaged in the strange situation paradigm, which is the gold standard measure of attachment in childhood. Next slide, please. And again, we see that same interaction where those individuals with the more sensitive variant of the OPRM1 gene, when combined with maternal insensitivity, were more likely to be categorized as anxiously attached as a child. So that's just a snapshot of the kinds of research we do in my lab. If you're interested, check out my lab website, check out our social media feed, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any specific questions for Professor Bartz about her research, about anything she's just discussed? We've asked you to hold questions for the end that are broader, and several of you, I'm very happy to see, are dropping questions into chat, which is also a really effective thing to do. But if you have a very specific question about what she's just presented, Alana, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, please go ahead.
Yes, you are. Thank you. Yes, I had a question. I'll be studying in psychology in McGill in fall 2025, and I was wondering, I was very interested by your research, and I was wondering if there's a possibility for me to be a research assistant like in the summer, or like how
Well, first, congratulations. We're looking forward to welcoming you to McGill. That's terrific news, into the psychology department. Yes, so we have roughly 31 professors in psychology who are doing fabulous research, and we really encourage students to get involved in volunteering, as well as doing thesis projects. You're probably a bit junior to do a thesis project, but certainly you can volunteer, and we're working on mechanisms to kind of facilitate volunteering. But if you check out my lab website, you'll find out about how to get in touch with my RA to find out about volunteering experiences. And I'll also mention to everybody that all the students, we in the psychology department just developed a 1.5 credit course where you actually get research credits for volunteering in labs. It involves a commitment for a year, and not too many hours a week, but it just formalizes the process. So this is called Psych 349. But anyway, that's another way to get involved in volunteering. And then there's thesis projects. So email me or email my research coordinator if you're interested in getting involved.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And again, there will be other opportunities for questions in just a little while. Please continue to put your questions in the chat, and we have several people who are fielding them as quickly as possible. But in the meantime, let me go ahead and move forward. I'd like to remind you of the colleague that I introduced a little while ago, Professor Santiago Camara, who's in the Department of Economics, and is going to be talking to you all a bit about his research and different ways in which undergraduate students might be involved in economics research here at McGill.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. And first of all, congratulations on being admitted at McGill. Again, I really hope that you join us next fall. So let me start by telling you a little bit more about the classes I teach and how that relates to my research. So Heidi, next slide, please. So I think one of the, let's say, first things that shocked me or got me interested in economics was seeing data, studying data about the levels of income per person across the world and how they vary dramatically. So, for example, McGill is very proud to have students from all over the world, and you'll probably experience classmates that come from every corner of the world, and you'll see that, for example, the average income per person in Canada is around $55,000. But if you see the average income of the person from Argentina, the country where I'm from, is less than a half of that. And if you go to certain sub-Saharan countries, it's much, much lower than that. So I think that was one of the first things that interested me in economics. And as the Nobel Prize winner Bob Lucas said, once you start thinking about economic growth, it's very hard to stop thinking or think about anything else. Next slide, please. And so, for example, one slide back, please. There you go, here. So, for example, in Econ 332, taught by some of my colleagues, you'll study, for example, what are the key reasons why these levels of income per capita can vary so widely across countries. And for example, you'll see theories like the Solow model that says, well, technology determines levels of income across countries, and different countries are, let's say, better at accumulating technologies, having more entrepreneurs, having more, let's say, inventors than others. You'll see other theories of, for example, different countries have different political institutions. Some are inclusive and foster growth. Some are extractive and just, let's say, produce income that's held by very few people doing not very productive activities. And there's also, I think, very valid for Canada and for other countries, are natural resources. And some people call them just being lucky. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Okay, next slide, please. Well, yes. Well, let's say Bob Lucas, who won the Nobel Prize, said, well, once you start thinking about economic growth, it's very hard to think about anything else. Most of my research actually thinks about business cycles. So business cycles, you can think that economies sometimes go through periods of, let's say, expansions and sometimes go through periods of contractions or recessions. So what I'm showing you here is a graph. So you're going to see two lines. You're going to see a blue line and an orange line. So the blue line is a measure of economic growth of industrial production in Canada. So you can see this is data starting in the year 2000 all the way to 2024. And you'll see that it sometimes is like above some like dotted line. So it says if it's above, it's growing above the average. If it's below, it's having a recession or a contraction. And in orange, what you can see is a measure of Canadian interest rates, which you can think it's how expensive it is to borrow for credit cards, to borrow for mortgages. So what you can see is that these figures kind of move around. And what I'm highlighting in red here is the Great Financial Crisis. So when I was preparing this, I realized that most of you probably were toddlers during the Great Financial Crisis in 2007, 2008, but maybe your parents can tell you more about this. But this was a very large recession. This was the largest recession since the Great Depression in the 1930s. And what you can see is that the interest rates went up dramatically, and there was a big recession in Canada. So for example, when you take my Econ 333 class, you'll study how when interest rates go up, this is more expensive to borrow, let's say for an entrepreneurial loan or for a mortgage or for credit cards, we're going to see consumption going down. We're going to see housing developments going down. We're going to see investment going down. And that's going to lead to a recession. Okay, next slide, please, Heidi. But here, I'm showing you the same graph in blue. This is industrial production in Canada. But what I'm showing you here is interest rates in the US. So what you see is that during this crisis in 2008, 2009, there was a big spike in interest rates in the US, but that got transmitted into Canadian interest rates. And here I'm just quoting a Nobel Prize winner who was a professor at McGill, Robert Mundell, who says dollar is king. And he studied how changes in interest rates in the US got transmitted to higher interest rates in Canada. And you can take my Econ 423 or my Econ 454 classes in which we study international trade. This is exports and import relationships between countries, which I think it's a very hot topic right now, studying how these countries trade with each other and talking about tariffs or other, let's say, policies regulating trade. Or you can also study, let's say, take my 454 class in which we study international finance. And you can study the linkages between the US and Canada or the US and the rest of the world in terms of financial linkages. For example, why countries borrow in dollars instead of their local currency. Why, when, for example, interest rates change in the US, get transmitted to the rest of the world. Next slide, please, Heidi. So just to wrap up on how this all, let's say, ties up with my research, most of my research studies how changes in interest rates in the US affect the rest of the world. So this was these graphs that you can see here is what happens to some key variables in the rest of the world when the US increases its interest rates. And you can see, for example, that exchange rates depreciates, they go up. It means that the value of your currencies in your wallets go down. You see GDP, so the level of income on the economy, falling dramatically. So does investment, so does imports. So in my Econ 459 class, I'm going to teach you some monetary models, some econometrics model. This is just a fancy word economists use for statistics. So I'm going to teach you how to do quantitative analysis and forecast analysis based on economics and monetary economics. This paper, I'm very lucky to have been forthcoming in a very good journal in economics. But why I wanted to mention this is that I have one of my students right now who took my Econ 423 and Econ 454, and we're doing an extension. This is one of my undergrad students, and we're doing an extension to study how this relationship varied across time and to see whether countries are getting better at isolating from the US or they're maybe getting worse. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I just joined McGill. I finished my doctorate less than 2 years ago, so I'm just joined McGill. I'm not going to have such a fancy CV as some of my colleagues here present, but please send me an email. And for example, one of the ways students get to do research with me is they take my classes, but at least Econ has an Econ 480, which is basically a semester class that you can take in which you can do research. Let's say a research project supervised by a professor, and I've done 5 already with students in which I try to help them develop their techniques to ask meaningful questions in a structured way and give them the tools to actually answer those questions. Okay, thank you, Heidi.
Thank you so much, Santiago. I think that you have one question, Sophia. I assume
Yeah.
that you have a question that's specific to the presentation we've just heard. Please go ahead.
Hi, it's really nice to meet you all. I'm planning on studying international development at McGill, but I just started taking macroeconomics in high school and I really, really like it. I'm very interested. I was wondering, is there any interaction at all between the economics department and the Department of International Studies? And could research be done that kind of combines the two disciplines? Because I am very interested in how economics, especially with everything that's going on right now, impacts the way countries interact with each other.
Definitely. There are multiple colleagues that have positions in both departments at the same time. And I can tell you from my Econ 423 International Trade class, I would say that 40% of students come from the international development studies. So there's a lot of interactions among us. There's a lot of colleagues. I mean, I have a lot of close colleagues where we're working together. And I think economics as a whole is moving to studying these relationships between economics and political economy. So for example, right now, I'm also studying how, let's say, increases or spikes in geopolitical risk that is happening right now, but it has happened a lot in the past, is gonna, let's say, deteriorate trade and financial linkages and possibly cause like recessions and that kind of stuff. So we're trying to get together and have something we can speak to both like economics and political and international development.
Great, thank you. I think we have one more specific question from Molly.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Professor. I was wondering if you could speak to like what the day-to-day for an undergrad in your, like who's researching under you looks like, because it's obviously like not a wet lab.
Oh, okay, yeah. So we're not a lab. So one of the things we do is it's very hard to find data, economic data. So when I was an undergrad and I was doing research assistantships, I thought this data was just there, that you could just Google it and you would find it. And maybe some countries like Canada or the US have very extended periods of time with data, but other countries, especially, let's say, less rich countries, it's very hard to find data. So for example, for some of my papers, I actually had to go to libraries and look for books and scan data. Then we had to process that data. So for example, now I'm working with micro level data on credit registries from Uruguay. So I can see all the, let's say, every time you swipe a credit card, every time you go to a bank, every time you do that, I see those transactions up. Well, not me, my co-authors, that's very confidential data, I must say. But that's a lot of data. That's millions and millions of transactions that you have to like put in a data set, clean it, study it. So there's construction of data, there's cleaning data, and then let's say I always try to get my students interacting and learning some of the techniques, these statistical techniques. So there's a lot of cleaning data, working with data, and getting the data to talk to us, speak to us.
Thank you.
Both. And thank you to Santiago again for a great presentation. Both of our lectures have been wonderful. But I turn things over now to one of our students, our living, breathing students, Sophia Flame, who's a U3, am I remembering correctly? And
Yes,
who this
U3.
past summer, is that also correct, completed an ARIA with the timing of it? Terrific. And so Sophia is going to give a presentation about her ARIA experience and also explain what an ARIA research internship is. And then we're going to hear a little bit from her supervisor, Professor Jessica Coon, at the end.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me and congratulations on your acceptance to McGill. I've had a wonderful time being a student here, so I hope you decide to come to Montreal in the fall. Next slide, please. So I'm Sophia. I'm in my U3, as Heidi mentioned, which is my last year of my undergraduate in linguistics in arts at McGill. So I have an honors concentration in linguistics and a minor concentration in Hispanic studies. And I got into linguistics just because I always loved learning languages in high school. I took as many as I could and saw that there was a really strong linguistics program here at McGill. Took my very first linguistics class, which was just Intro to Linguistics with Dr. Jessica Coon, and absolutely fell in love with it. And after a couple more years of taking linguistics classes, I really realized that I wanted to learn more about what it could look like outside of just studying, just taking classes, and wanted to get into independent research. So I reached out to a couple of professors over email, including Jessica, who had just started working a little bit more closely on Kanien'kéha, which is an indigenous language spoken around here in Montreal. Next slide, please. So just a little bit more about Kanien'kéha. It's a Northern Iroquoian language spoken on the land where McGill University is currently situated. So over on the left is a map of Haudenosaunee communities in the 21st century, and it's really tiny. I'm sorry about that, but the places in red are Kanien'kéha territories. Today, as the result of colonial efforts to eradicate indigenous languages, there are only about 600 first language speakers, and most of them are elders, so over the age of 70. But there are a lot of community-driven efforts to revitalize the language. There are some language nests for community members and their families, as well as full-time language immersion programs for adults, 2-year-long programs which are successfully producing new speakers and reestablishing intergenerational transmission of Kanien'kéha in the home. Next slide. So in terms of Kanien'kéha research at McGill, Jessica began collaborating with Linguistics, which is a grassroots in 2021, which is a grassroots organization for advanced L2, which is second language learners, that is aimed at supporting immersion graduates in continuing to advance their fluency. So after they graduate from the 2-year language immersion program. And the research at McGill has continued to evolve in the years since then. And now there are a whole bunch of different research projects going on, which all involve collaborations between McGill linguistics students and professors, and Kanien'kéha community members. So some of those include a transcription project, which involves working on transcribing and translating some radio shows that are recorded entirely in Kanien'kéha, but haven't been transcribed or translated. There's also collaboration with the Ladiwanahnilat's adult immersion program, which is in Kahnawake, right near the South Shore of Montreal. And then some linguistics focused elicitation and fieldwork with elder speakers. Next slide. So my research, my linguistics research on Kanien'kéha is specifically about word order. If you don't know much about linguistics, I don't know how familiar of a concept this will be, but English has very strict subject-verb-object or SVO word order, and doesn't deviate from that very much. But many languages have a much freer word order, like Kanien'kéha. So all 6 logically possible orders are possible in the language. And those are all shown in the image on the left. All of these sentences mean Zak likes her dress, but you can have Zak first, the verb first, the dress first, and all of these make sense in the language. So I have been looking into that and why that is the case. And I found that word order is primarily governed by something called information structure, of which there are 2 main components, topic and focus. Focus is a little easier to explain. It's the element that provides new information in the sentence. It's what makes the sentence interesting. So if you ask a question, the answer to that question is usually the focus of the sentence. And in English, this is expressed through intonation, but in Kanien'kéha, it tends to be expressed through word order. So whatever is focused, whatever is the most important, always comes first. And topic is a little bit less intuitive, but very loosely, it's what the sentence is about. So a speaker at the beginning of a dialogue or telling a story might establish the topic of conversation, and then follow that up with a comment about that topic. So topics are also initial in Kanien'kéha, and they come before focus. So that's just a brief overview of what I have been looking into. Next slide, please. So in order to look into this, last summer, I was lucky enough to receive an ARIA. So this is a program at McGill. They're called Arts Research Internship Awards, and they enable undergraduate students to undertake independent research during the summer. They're 11 weeks long, and you get to do them under the direct supervision of a faculty member. So the Faculty of Arts provides an award of $2,500, which is then matched by the faculty supervisor to provide a total award of $5,000 to the student. So this is what I did last summer and used that opportunity to continue to investigate word order in Kanien'kéha. And what that looked like for me was just a lot of time poring over a book of Kanien'kéha narratives. It's a really wonderful resource because it has the orthography in Kanien'kéha and then a word-by-word translation in English and then a free translation at the bottom. And so I went through the book and recorded the word order. Next slide, please. And this was the final product of my ARIA. So at the end of the summer, actually, I think this was in the fall, there's a showcase where all of the ARIA students get to present their work from the summer. So this graph in the middle here was all of the word orders that I found in the stories. And you can see that SVO is clearly the most common subject, verb, object like English, but all 6 of the word orders were represented in this book. And throughout the summer, I also got to work a little bit on the transcription project and the creation of a website to showcase some of the other wonderful work that on Kanien'kéha that has been happening in the McGill Linguistics department. Next slide, please. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is my honors thesis. I am not sure how it works in other departments, but in linguistics, when you are an honors concentration in linguistics, part of that is getting to write a thesis during your last year. It's a year-long course, and Professor Jessica Coon has been my supervisor. So this past year, I've spent writing this thesis on word order in Kanien'kéha, and the ARIA has been so helpful as I have begun to write this thesis, because I had already collected so much data through those 11 weeks in the summer. So it felt like I had already started writing, and it was really easy to go into it. So writing a thesis has been a great opportunity. It's been great time management practice to have an independent research project, but it's also a really good skill to have in your future in general, to be able to do academic writing or just a big writing project in general. And I think that's everything. Thank you very much.
Jessica, did you want to anything
Thanks,
more?
Sophia. Oh, can you hear me? Okay, sorry, I think my internet connection is a little unstable, but I just wanted to, so thank you, Sophia. That was great. Great to meet you all virtually. Congratulations again on being admitted to McGill. Like others have said, we hope to see you here in the fall. I just wanted to add two things onto Sophia's presentation. One is that one thing I really love about this project, and that I think is reflective of a lot of the research happening in the Faculty of Arts, is that it has impacts both within academia and beyond. Right, so in linguistics, we're interested in the innate human capacity for language and what it means about human cognition, right? So human children learn languages quickly and easily based on whatever language that they are exposed to, but languages also differ from one another in really important ways. And so as linguists, in order to build a theory of how human language works, it's really important that we look not just at languages like English and Spanish and French, but also at really typologically different languages. And Kanien'kéha is a great example of that. So there are important consequences for our understanding of the range of cross-linguistic variation that comes out of work of the kind that Sophia is doing, but also from the community side of things. Sophia spoke about the language revitalization work that's happening in and around Montreal, led by communities. And this kind of work can help contribute resources to language learners, right? Because as Sophia showed, word order in the language it's described as optional, right? And this is what you find in a lot of teaching materials, that any possible word order is an option. But of course, if you're learning to speak a language, you have to make a choice, right? So more information about the factors that go into the different word orders is really valuable. And in addition to the core sort of thesis work that Sophia is doing, she's also presented this work in community and is working on a community-facing sort of guide to word order that's going to accompany her thesis. So I think it's really a great example of work that has impacts in different areas. And then the second thing I wanted to note is Sophia mentioned at the beginning that she got involved in this by emailing a couple of professors. But I also wanted to note that Sophia did this in a very good way. So as professors, we often get emails from students, like yourselves, who say, "Hi, Professor so-and-so, I'm interested in your research. What can I do?" And usually we try to point them to helpful things. But what Sophia did was really lay out, here's specifically what I'm interested in doing. Here's what I learned from your class and what I got out of it and what I'd like to learn more about. And here are some of the skills and interests. It was really an excellently crafted email. And so I just want to say that is a great way to approach this. I can tell many of you already have these ideas because you're here, you're asking these kinds of questions. But coming to professors and saying, "Hey, I'm interested, how can I get involved?" And bringing some of your own context and what makes you interested in the research is a really great way to approach this. And yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, both of you. It really is a fascinating project. All right, we have one more reminder slide before turning things over to all of you to pose your questions or for us to have a more sort of dynamic conversation around the chat. But just a reminder, and let me move my images of everyone for a moment. Sorry, I will go back. Hold on. Can you still see the PowerPoint? Okay, give me 1 second. Okay. All right, so just a reminder that we have 2 more events coming up. The first is another online event, the third in this kind of trilogy of recruitment events that we've been offering over the last few weeks. This one's going to be themed Discovering the Faculty of Arts, Studying at McGill, and it will be held on April 14th from noon to 1. And this is, as I understand, going to be more of a roundtable discussion with professors and students who are really going to impact the experience of studying at McGill. And if you'd like to ask more questions about that, I'm sure that there are others among us who can answer those at greater level of specificity. And then also an in-person event, Meet McGill, which is going to be coming up on, I think, April 5th from noon to 4 p.m. And then a second iteration of that, April 26th from noon to 5 p.m. So just 2 things for you to keep in mind. And I will now turn things over to the chat. I think that we mentioned in our housekeeping slide earlier that we can do this in a couple of different ways. If you have questions, it seems like it's been effective so far for you to raise your hands. That bumps you to the front of my queue and I can see. So please feel free to proceed that way, or drop questions into the chat that we can now just kind of answer in a more ad hoc fashion. Yeah, please, Ali.
Hi, I've been very inspired by all the presentations tonight, and as someone who is still looking towards picking exactly where I want to go with my studies at McGill, I'm interested in a lot of all these different regions. So I was wondering what the cross-disciplinary research field looks like at McGill, how easy it is for someone studying in one field to participate, even if it is minorly, say, in research in another, or at least like have some sort of access to, information or being able to even come in and help in a lab for a little bit. Like I remember there was a 1.5 credit course for lab volunteers. I'm not sure how that works with different departments and such, so I was wondering if I could get enlightened with that one.
So maybe I'll ask Professor Bartz and Professor Camara if either of you have things that you'd like to say, in part because you probably do have a lot of cross-disciplinary interaction. And then I can perhaps weigh in, or certainly any of my other colleagues can too.
Should I go first?
Please,
Yeah, ladies first.
Well, right. So in terms of just exposure to courses, students who are not psychology majors can take psychology courses in the department. But we also do supervised theses for students who are not majoring in psychology. There's more of a formal mechanism to do it if you're in the Faculty of Science, because the Faculty of Science has this kind of general thesis course that can be taken. If you're not a major, say in computer science, you could do a thesis in computer science. I'm actually not sure if the Faculty of Arts has that, but I can certainly look into it. But those would be the ways to kind of do that.
Terrific, thank you.
Okay, so let me give you an example. So I'm a professor of economics, but what I notice is that there are a lot of students who, for example, are majoring in economics, but now have a minor in computer science. So there's a lot of like cross-field undergraduate students with like very widely different interest. And I had one of those students last year who during the summer wanted to do a research project. So I told him, okay, and he was thinking about applying to grad school. So I told him, okay, I have some experience with natural language processing. And I have a paper in which we study how the speeches of central bankers or presidents of central banks affect financial markets. So I told him like, okay, well, you have a major in economics, honors majors in economics, and a minor in computer science. Why don't we think about an application of this that might be of value to you when you're applying to grad school as a writing sample? So he wrote a very nice paper. And for example, the Faculty of Arts now has, I think it's like an award in which it connects people from the Faculty of Arts with people from computer science who are trying to do something like that. So there's a lot of like, let's say, interconnections. The specific type of connection that you want to do will depend on your own interest. But you see a lot of students with, again, wide types of interest, trying to bring them together. And for example, economics allows you to do this Econ 480 research project. And there are some resources within arts that are trying to put these things together. But again, the specifics are going to depend on your specific interest and the specific department.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I just wanted to add one thing, 2 points. So we have a number of different kind of thesis projects that students can do in psychology, from 1 semester to 2 semester thesis projects, and you don't have to be a psychology major necessarily to take those. The other thing is that you can also do a double major. So if you have, if you want to do economics and psychology, that's entirely possible as an arts student, because there are fewer course requirements for arts psychology majors than there are for science psychology majors. So there's more room to do that.
Awesome. Thanks.
There are
Go ahead.
Sorry. There are several psychologists who won Nobel Prizes in economics. So yeah, there's a lot of,
To just kind of pull back a little bit from the very specific and very helpful answers that we've heard already, I think McGill is the kind of place that's a big university, but has a kind of small vibe as well. And so I think you'll find that as you get to know professors and experiment with different courses and different subject areas, that people are going to be supportive of some of the connections you're interested in exploring. And then we do have more interdisciplinary programs like the International Development Studies program and things of this nature, where it's just baked into the program structure that you're going to be taking courses from a lot of different offering units and so forth. And so that's something to keep in mind as well. We don't necessarily expect you, nor would we necessarily want you to come to campus with a very clear idea of what you're doing, and no sort of interest in exploring and kind of figuring out new subject areas of interest.
Thank you so
Heidi,
much.
if I may, there is a question in the chat regarding when is the best time to commence looking into internship opportunities, and I wondered whether Sophia might have some insights into that.
Sophia, you're exactly the person that we should kick this to.
Yeah, I honestly would say as soon as possible. There's no harm in applying and reaching out to professors. That's what I did. And the worst that happened when I was receiving responses from professors who I'd asked to do research with was, come back to me once you've taken this class. You don't have enough background for this yet. So I would say there's no harm in applying to those internships or seeking out research opportunities as soon as possible.
Is that the case, Sophia, even before somebody matriculates at McGill? Or do you have in mind kind of once a student is on campus, taking some courses, making more personal connections with profs, that's the right time to start approaching them about research possibilities going forward?
Yes, that's a good point. I would definitely say after you've taken a couple of McGill classes, maybe after your first year. But yeah, after a couple of classes, I think.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep an eye on the chat as well. Do we have another question? Sophie, please go ahead.
Hi, me again. So I toured McGill back in, I believe it was April, and I was lucky enough to see some of the lecture halls. It's a really cool campus. One thing that I was told was that during your freshman year or your foundation year, a lot of your classes are going to be really big lecture halls, and you obviously are taking a lot of kind of survey level courses that are prerequisites for everything. But I was kind of wondering, and I guess this was a question for both Miss Flame and for the professors, how do you build a relationship with a professor that could lead to a research opportunity or further relationship in your freshman year when you're in big classes like that? Do you have any advice, I guess is what I'm asking?
I mean, I have let's say one specific example I can share with you. So I teach one of my classes that has 150 students. And I usually hold office hours twice a week. You would be surprised how, let's say, few students actually want to come and like really talk about certain topics. I mean, and this is a class on international trade, so I think it's a very hot topic right now. But I think like there was a student who kept coming every week, and I like really encourage this. So you can come and talk about the class, talk about specific questions, talk about let's say maybe you're struggling with something and we can talk about it, but also you want, I don't know, you're saying like, okay, what's happening with tariffs now? How can I think about it? How can I think about an application to Canada or the US or China or Europe? And I can give you some, let's say I can give you some material, some like research papers, and I can give you some more content that's more, let's say, blog type, easier to understand. Or I can tell you, hey, you want to know more? I think the advice I keep giving people is look at the data, and I can show you what are the data sets that you can look at, and then you can. I always say get your hands dirty with the data. And I had a student who kept coming, and I try to encourage students to come to my office. So like I always bring, like I bake cakes and I bring it to office hours, and usually I just have to make my colleagues eat it, right? But I had a student and she kept coming, she kept asking me questions. And at some point, like she kept saying that she wanted to do a research paper. And at some point I was like really pushing her. Like I gave her two very like state-of-the-art papers in the literature. And I thought, okay, she's gonna be very scared. She's never gonna come back. And she came like the following week and she started talking about it. And I said, okay, explain that to me. And she explained it like very, very well. And eventually she took two of my classes and we're writing a paper together and we're about to send it out for publication. So even in big classes, I think professors really encourage you to like come to talk to us about office hours or after class. We're all, I think, always willing to give you more and more like material for you to read, for you to know, to learn more. So even in big classes, we'll make time for you. And if you show interest and you keep like making progress, I think that can lead to very, let's say, cool things. Yeah.
Thank you. Nelly, I want to give you an opportunity. I know you've been waiting. And also, Jennifer, I'm just going to direct you to the chat. There are a couple of very specific questions about psychology. Maybe that could be a place if you have something to weigh in with there.
You want me to reply back in the chat as opposed to speak?
That would be great if you could, so that we don't run out of time and Nelly has a chance. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to answer a question on the chat because it was regarding what is the difference between psychology and arts and psychology and science.
Okay, maybe we can actually have both of you here. Sorry, Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with the second question about the honors in psychology and getting into grad school. So maybe if you could take the first part of it, and then I'll jump in.
Sure. It's really like in order to be in the Faculty of Science to get accepted, you need to have had your basic sciences. And once you're accepted, you could select psychology as your major. However, that also allows you to take courses like higher level in biology and chemistry that you can use sometimes towards psychology. In arts, you don't have to have those basic science courses to be accepted in the Faculty of Arts and to study psychology. However, there is certain prerequisites you need, and that is a biology course, like a CJIP biology course, human biology that you need. So, and an introduction to psychology. So I guess it's the same courses, right? It's exactly the same courses. It's just that they're different faculties and they have different prerequisites to get accepted. And in science, you are permitted to take higher level science courses because you have those basic sciences. In some cases, but really it's the same courses, right?
Yeah, so as I understand it, I'm just learning the different types of majors. In arts, the number of credits are slightly fewer than the number of credits required in science, but that you can add different concentrations to bring you up to the exact number of credits that are required for the science students. And going to this question about getting into grad school and the honors program. So the honors program is comparable, you know, that being in honors psychology is the most classes that you will take in psychology. I can't remember exactly how many credits, but it's a lot. And the question about graduate school is there's something special in Quebec, and I hope I'm not going to bore everybody. I'll try to do this as quickly as possible, called the OPQ, Order of Psychologues de Québec. And they have very specific requirements that they want undergraduate students to have taken when they apply to graduate programs in clinical psychology in Quebec. And we know what all those classes are. And if you take the most comprehensive version of the arts major or you do the science major, you will have taken those classes. So I think that's where that information that you're getting about, you know, either doing honors psychology or doing, you know, science is positions you better for graduate school. The other main thing about getting into graduate school is having that kind of research thesis experience or the volunteering experience in lab, which there's, you know, many opportunities. And I'll just finally, this will be the last thing I'll say on the topic, is that actually McGill psychology undergraduates, and I'm sure this is true for other areas, other departments, are highly sought after by graduate programs in psychology because they get such excellent training. The number of classes that you take in psychology is quite extensive. So our undergrads who want to go into graduate school do pretty well.
Yeah. And if I can just add one little thing about in arts, how students are able to get the 54 credits they need by the our structure of our degree, where they can do a major concentration in psych and do an additional minor in behavioral science. It's just that they must have another minor in an arts discipline as well. So that will prepare them for graduate work as well.
So
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. I've been trying to answer some questions in the chat about archaeology, among other things, but I had to jump on that one. Allie, please go ahead and then please continue to drop questions in the chat. I just wanted to draw everyone's attention before Allie poses her question to the fact that I put up a slide with contact info for our Arts Oasis advising team. So please, if you have additional questions you don't have a chance to raise here or at the next session or at some of the events to follow, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us, but that office in particular, as perhaps the first point of entry into getting the answers that you're looking for. Allie, go ahead.
Thank you, and I hope I'm not taking up too much time. This is kind of a quicker question. It was going off of something someone else has already spoken about, but as an IB student, I think that provided I do well on my exams, I'll be going into U1 or at least taking U1 courses according to the McGill website. And I was wondering how that applied to class sizes. Are we still looking at larger base level course classes even in U1? Because I understand that U0 is more of like a foundational year, but is U1 more foundational to your specific discipline, or am I looking at smaller, more specified classes for U2 or U1? Thank you.
So maybe I'll start to say a few things about this, and please either Nellie or Joelle jump in because you know this from a different perspective. Mine is a bit more anecdotal. I think it's often the case for U1 for IB students, for any students who come here with advanced standing out of SAGEP or however, US AP credits, for instance. For students to begin to take courses, a kind of balance of courses at the 200 level, which may not even be that large, and 300 level courses. We advise you always to be mindful in your programs of study, of prerequisites, of, you know, the kind of principle of foundation building and taking courses that are appropriate to your level. But many programs, and this really does vary from program to program, are not going to restrict you from taking a, say, a 300 level course if you have the requisite background. It's also the case that different programs, different departments enforce or don't enforce, as the case may be, prerequisites for their upper level courses in different ways. And so in history, oftentimes prerequisites are meant as a guide that are suggestive of the kind of background we hope a student will have if they take a 300 level course in European history or something like that. But I would really encourage you, if you see a course that's interesting to you, especially one that has a more intimate intellectual environment, gives you an opportunity to be in a smaller class size and to get to know a professor better, to consider reaching out and to just say, here's the work that I've done. I have IB credits in these areas. I've taken this AP curriculum. Is it appropriate for me to take this course? And over the summer, sometimes people are slow to respond, but I think that's a good way to go. Or for specific programs like history, or pick your program among our units. We maintain lists that are publicly available to all of you of our advising structure. And so you might also consider reaching out to the undergraduate program director of a department or program, or to assigned advisors. Sometimes advisors are just assigned, as in history, to spans of the alphabet. And you have every right to reach out to someone and to pose these kinds of questions about specific courses.
Thank
All
you.
right.
I'm assuming this is before any course selection situation in early June that I should do this reaching out as soon as possible if
So-
I'm looking at courses and I'm looking at what I'm thinking to register for.
Yeah, it's a good idea to do that. And the last thing I'll say, just from experience, and I know we're kind of at time now, just be aware too that the numbers are going to fluctuate a lot. Sometimes students get really panicked when they go to register for courses and they don't get into the courses that they want. And they feel like, the whole McGill experience, at least for the first year, is totally blown. Our numbers change quite a lot. People add courses and drop them throughout the summer, and especially do so with sort of new fervent enthusiasm during the add drop period. And so sometimes courses have wait lists activated for them. Probably all of them should, but this is applied unevenly. Just continue to monitor, to add yourself to wait lists, and oftentimes those numbers do change. All right, is there anything that I'm forgetting, colleagues? I don't know. I haven't heard anything. Speak now or forever hold your peace. But this has been a wonderful session. I'm so grateful to all of you for joining us at this late-ish hour, to my children who did not interrupt us miraculously, although you can sort of hear the din downstairs. And I just want to say the thing we've all said a million times now: congratulations again. You should all feel really proud of yourselves for having been accepted. We would really love to have you as students, and you should feel free to reach out to any of us if you have additional questions. All right.